Good afternoon, everyone. I think although we have lots of people missing, we'll continue because we have to keep the time. So we will start the technical session 2 on the project presentation itself, and the session chair is Professor Shanti Swarup Sharma, Senior Professor, Sikkim University. So I would like to hand over the session to Professor Sharma.
Okay, Dr. Sarala Khaling from ATREE, Dr. Bhoj Acharya from Sikkim University, Head Department of Zoology. So we start the session 2, and in the inaugural session and in session 1, so we had some in the inaugural session. So we had a very excellent overview of diverse ecological aspects of Himalayas from none other than Dr. Eklavya Sharma. All other lectures in session 1, they were very, very educative about different aspects of ecology from different parts of the country, Himalayas and mountains. And in session 2, so we come to this will be focused on socio-ecological landscapes. So key ecosystem services and biodiversity components in socio-ecological landscapes of Sikkim-Darjeeling Himalaya. And essentially, so we'll have the presentations by researchers involved in this project. And indeed, this is a very, very important dimension because we know these protected areas, conservation and everything else, but there is ecology beyond that. Socio-ecological landscapes, they're very, very important. And I believe, what I understand, that we will be focusing on agriculture landscapes, biodiversity in agriculture landscapes. And when we talk about agriculture, and when we talk about these two parts of Himalaya, Sikkim and Darjeeling, I think, so what comes to my mind is that when we talk of agriculture, biodiversity in agriculture, then agriculture is facing many different kinds of stresses in the context of climate change. So climate change is not a single stress. So very often when we talk about climate change, we talk about CO2 concentration, but that is not all. So drought is there. So there are many different soil conditions. For example, in Sikkim itself, so sizable areas in Sikkim, they have the soil, so that is acidic. So less than pH is less than 5 in some areas. And all these aspects, they are going to affect the agriculture. If agriculture is affected, so they are similarly going to affect the biodiversity. And that sense, so this project provides a very, very important and relevant dimension of biodiversity. When we talk about these two parts of Himalaya, Sikkim and Darjeeling, so Sikkim is organic, so free from all kinds of chemicals. And Darjeeling, so which is otherwise. So a comparison can be drawn in these two, so a chemical-free scenario and a scenario so where chemicals are still applied. So this comparison, so this can reveal very, very important insights into the biodiversity conservation in these landscapes. And what I also believe through my discussions from Dr. Bhoj Acharya, that fauna and flora components, so they will be discussed. They are interdependent, we know, for various purposes, for survival. So they are all going to affect the issues. So what I believe is that the topic is very, very relevant, and the team of researchers from ATREE and Sikkim University, they make a very vibrant team, so trained in diverse disciplines of ecology and animal sciences and plant sciences. So we look forward to some very good presentations from the researchers of the project. So before we start with that, so I think I'll invite Dr. Bhoj Acharya to introduce this NMHS funded project, funded to ATREE and Sikkim University. So Dr. Bhoj Acharya, so please introduce your project.
So good afternoon, respected chair, and all the participants. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Slideshow mode.
Yeah, I think it is now in a slideshow mode. Yeah, so thank you, sir, for introducing the session and accepting our invitation to chair this session. And I'll quickly give an outline of the project that we had, which we jointly undertaken by the Department of Zoology and Department of Horticulture in Sikkim University and ATREE. And this is the title of the project. We actually wanted to evaluate the key ecosystem services and different kinds of biodiversity components outside protected area regimes in Sikkim and Darjeeling. And our aim also was to develop some management and policy inputs which can be useful for the policy makers. So that was the aim. With that aim, we started this project, and this project was sanctioned on 1st of January 2018, initially for 3 years. Actually, it was supposed to end by the 31st of December 2020, but because of this pandemic, some of the works were still pending, and then we requested the funding agency, and we got an extension for another 9 months, and finally, technically, it ended on 30th of September 2021. And now we are preparing the final report, and we are waiting for this closure workshop to hold, and then by the end of this month, we'll submit our report. So I already mentioned the Department of Zoology and Horticulture from Sikkim University and the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, Eastern Himalayan Office was involved in this project. And we also divided some of our roles. Sikkim University was involved in doing research on birds, butterflies, odonates, herpetofaunal and biodiversity. And ATREE did research on ecosystem services, mammals and plants. And then for rest of the components like capacity building and outreach and policy output activities, we carried out jointly. In addition to that, there is one important component of the project that was to develop the database for this region, and that was taken care by our partner ATREE. So this project involved the group of around 22 people, 2 principal investigators. One is from both the institute, and then we have 3 co-principal investigators and 1 database coordinator from ATREE. Similarly, we had 2 very dedicated research associates, Dr. Jins working with Sikkim University and Bishal Thakuri from ATREE. And we also had a dedicated researcher, Dr. Sailendra Dewan, Bishal Thakuri, Roshan, Aditya, and Naulak, who dedicatedly work for the entire duration of the project. Basically, the project suffers when the research fellows leave in between, but this way we are very lucky to have all these very dedicated people, and they are still with us. And all these 5 researchers, they are doing PhD. Sailendra Dewan has already completed, and others are also in the various stages of their degree. And we had a database assistant, and we also had 7 field assistants who assisted us in the field for various activities. So these 4 were the major objectives that were approved by the funding agency. The first one is based on is to do research to understand what kind of biodiversity elements and ecosystem services is retained in different kinds of agro-ecosystems, especially in the socio-ecological landscape of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya, and we have focused on some of the key taxa. And the second objective, because if you want to conserve biodiversity, there should be a general kind of awareness, and then we need to have trained people who can understand and do research on biodiversity. So we focused on enhancing the capacity of various stakeholders, and at various levels. We train students, researchers, traditional and local community-based institutions, and general citizens in order to document and monitor biodiversity and the status of ecosystem services. And the third objective, although we have a lot of databases that are available in India and outside, but there is none that exist in the region, and we thought of developing a database dedicated for this region. and we could do that, and the results should be highlighted by the coordinator later. And the fourth one was to, based on our research and then also on the policy consultation meetings that we had in different parts of the project areas, we proposed to develop the policy guidelines for the and management recommendations for the conservation of biodiversity and flow of ecosystem services in human modified landscapes. So largely we are able to achieve all the 4 objectives within the 4 years tenure of this project. So the project is extended into the outside the protected areas and forest regimes. It covers the entire state of Sikkim and then 2 hill districts of West Bengal, that's Darjeeling and Kalimpong districts. So we covered 18 sites, which spanned from as low as 300 meter to 5,000 meter elevation. And we divided all our study sites into 3 major ecosystems. We focused on agro-pastoral systems. We have taken a lot of sites, 11 sites from different kinds of agricultural systems, and we also have taken some sites from the cultivation landscapes. So as far as the agro-pastoral systems are concerned, these are some of the unique landscapes that are found in the Lachen, Lachung, and Thangu valleys in North Sikkim, and also in some parts of the high elevation areas in East Sikkim. So, but this project focused only on the northern part of Sikkim. So here we can see that the people live in harmony with nature, and then they do some kind of agricultural practices, and then they move up and down based on the seasons along with their herd of cattle. And they grow different kinds of crops like vegetables, mostly the potato, some kind of cabbage, and then some fruits such as apples, and some other crops like maize. And then they move depending upon the season. So this is one of the unique landscape that we have. The other ecosystem that we covered was different kinds of agro-ecosystems. And within this, because we have a diversity of agro-ecosystems in the region, we have farm-based agroforestry, where different kinds of crops are grown, like maize, millet, and different kinds of oil seeds are grown. And we do have a very good representation of the terrace rice cultivation. We focused on those systems as well. And we also focused on large cardamom-based agroforestry system in different parts of the study area. And the third type of the ecosystem that we considered was the tea cultivation. And as we all know that Darjeeling as well as Sikkim is famous for tea, and we have many tea cultivation sites, especially in Darjeeling. So we have taken 3 tea cultivation areas from Darjeeling and 1 that is Timi in South Sikkim from Sikkim. So these are some of the sites. These are the sites that we have covered. So in the agro-ecosystem, we covered 6 sites from Sikkim and 5 from Darjeeling-Kalimpong region. And for agro-pastoral, all the sites were from Sikkim. And for the tea cultivation, as I mentioned, 3 sites were from the Darjeeling and 1 from Sikkim. And although scholars will be talking, giving the more detail about the results that have been obtained, but I'll quickly go through overall achievements that what we have done. So as far as the objective 1 is concerned, we have been able to record around 566 species of the different wild organisms that occur in the outside protected areas, especially in these agricultural ecosystems. Out of these species, 226 were birds, 186 species of butterflies, 52 odonates, 53 mammals, and 49 species of herpetofauna. We have also done some kind of assessment on agrobiodiversity, and we were able to record 72 species of crops, 65 medicinal plants, and 12 major livestock varieties. And based on our research and then our activities, we are able to produce the knowledge products also. We have developed one database that I mentioned, and then we could bring out 7 peer-reviewed journal articles in reputed journals, and some are already processed also. And we also have published some popular articles both in English and the local lingua franca, that is Nepali. And we also have produced some outreach materials. We developed some taxa-based posters for focusing on 13 different types, and we printed 100 copies each, and then we distributed to all the stakeholders, and mostly during the training that we organize and the awareness program that we organize. And also we have given it to the forest department and homestays owners. Apart from that, we have produced 15 geographical information system based land use land cover maps for the study sites that can be used by anyone who wants to do further research in the region. And the major, one more major achievement of the project was we were able to produce 2 biodiversity and agricultural training manual, which is written in 2 languages, both English and Nepali. So those who are unable to follow English, they can use these manuals in Nepali language, and then they can be involved in biodiversity conservation and eco-friendly agricultural practices. So the overall aim of our research was to compare the biodiversity that occurs in the forest with the adjoining agricultural land. So when we combine all the data, briefly I would like to show here is that in the agro-pastoral system, the diversity of the all the components that we have covered in agricultural and the forest land in agro-pastoral system were almost equal, whereas in the case of the other agro-ecosystems, the different kinds of agro-ecosystems that I have shown you, there the agricultural land was, in terms of diversity, in terms of species, were higher than the nearby forest patches, and the same was reflected in the tea cultivation landscape. But it differs based on what kind of species we're talking about, because we have seen in the presentation of Dr. Shankar Raman in the morning, in the today's afternoon, that because the type of species will be different, so that kind of result, that kind of analysis has been done briefly, and then our scholars will show the result in detail in their presentation. So for the objective 2 also, we are able to do quite a lot of work, and we have been able to train many people. We conducted 22 various level awareness meetings, 4 workshops for the local communities, and we constituted 5 new BMCs and trained them on biodiversity documentation. And we also established 3 community seed banks in Sikkim. And for the ecosystem services, a lot of choice experiments were conducted, and 37 focal group discussions were conducted, and till now we have identified 28 ecosystem services. And we also did some local level institutional survey, and we identified that 136 local level institutions are involved in the issues of biodiversity conservation and ecosystem services. Apart from that, we have been working in close association with the State Biodiversity Board of both the states in Darjeeling and Sikkim, and then we are able to produce the People's Biodiversity Registers of 13 PMCs. We assisted them, and we also prepared the People's Biodiversity Register and submitted to the respective biodiversity board. And we also did some livelihood training, and around 300 people have already been benefited. And recently, we have prepared 2 biodiversity management plan for 2 GPUs in Sikkim. And for as far as the students are concerned, we have conducted 8 trainings, and 254 participants have already benefited. And as highlighted by Honorable Vice Chancellor in the morning, 5 researchers have been involved, and then 1 already got a PhD, and 4 are in the various stages of the course. Apart from that, we also trained 31 masters dissertation, and many of them have done excellent work, and many of them were able to publish their findings in a good journal. And we also supported 17 internships on biodiversity documentation. And we have been raising the awareness also, because some of the work were impacted by COVID. So we were not sitting idle, and we are organizing some online events, and we organized a few online events, including some online talks on mammals and butterflies last year. And the third objective, we were able to develop this website, and there are more than 7,000 species records now. And we have also been involved in training the people to populate the data in these databases through different various workshops. And the fourth objective is concerned, we conducted many stakeholder consultation meetings at different at state level, at district level in Darjeeling, and 2 state level in Sikkim. And then we have also conducted various local level stakeholder consultation meetings, maybe around 15 plus. And then based on our research findings and also based on the stakeholder consultation meetings, we have been able to develop 2 policy documents. One is for the state of Sikkim and one for the Gorkhaland Territorial Administration that has already been prepared, which is vetted by the experts also, and it is ready for submission to the government. So we are hoping for its submission to the government within this month. So overall, we have been able to achieve almost all the objectives despite some of the difficulties that we faced. Almost all the objectives that we have proposed to the funding agencies. So I just would like to show some of the publications, the research publications, journal articles that have been published through the data that have been generated through the project. So 7, as I mentioned, these are the publications. Some good publications have come out, and some of the publications are in process. And as I was talking about these manuals, so these 2 manuals that we produced, these are very useful, and those who are interested to work more on biodiversity on a quantitative basis, or maybe on a general basis also. Even if someone who is not able to understand English, they can follow the Nepali protocol. So both of these are written in a very, very simple language, and we have also obtained the ISBN number for these booklets. And we also have produced this manual on climate smart agriculture training and crop manual. Within the copies we have already distributed to the different people in the region, and those who are interested to go through these, I think a few copies still are available with us. And we also have been involved in writing some of the popular articles in newspapers and newsletters, both in English as well as in the local languages, that is Nepali, because we wanted to reach the findings of the research not only to confine in the technical, the peer-reviewed journals, but we wanted that our findings percolates down to the community, because the communities are the one who are actually stakeholder of the land, and their involvement is very, very important. So with that aim, we have been writing these kind of popular articles in both the languages. And these are some of the glimpses of the posters that we developed through the project. So with this, I come to an end of my presentation, and the detail of each activities will be given by the researchers and the PIs in the follow-up presentation. So thank you everyone, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Bhoj Acharya, for providing the details of the project, objectives, and achievements. And it seems that all the objectives have been successfully fulfilled already in terms of publications, the trainings provided to the students, PhDs produced, and publications, etc. I think now we'll begin with the presentations from the students, from the research scholars. And so how do you want it to go? Shall we ask the questions at the end of every presentation, or we'll do it at the end of the session? Dr. Bhoj Acharya,
I think it's designed for at the end of the session.
End of the session will be better, sir.
Okay, I think we'll do this at the end of the session. So for every speaker, so please note that you are provided 10 minutes each. So consider this, that each one of you will be allowed only 10 minutes. And the first speaker I invite is Thangsuanlian Naulak, a PhD scholar from ATREE, Regional Office Northeast India, Gangtok. And the topic is mammal communities in the socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. So Mr. Naulak, so please.
Okay, thank you, sir. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to share with you all my Wait, just a second. Are you guys able to see my this thing on the screen? I
We can see your
this.
cover slide.
Okay, and I'll just try to remove this. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to share with you all our research on mammal communities in the socio-ecological landscape of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. And as we all know, mammals are a diverse group of species within a taxa, occupying different habitat types ranging from aquatic to terrestrial. And as such, mammals have an extensive influence on the ecosystem, thereby contributing to human well-being by providing services such as pollination, pest control, seed dispersal, and bioturbation of soils, among others. And based on our review of historical records of mammals from the landscape, we have found that Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya is a home to 173 species of mammals. And this amounts to about 1/3 of mammal species found in India. Although this is significant, understanding the extent and degree to which these mammals can coexist with humans is important for conservation action and policy making. Therefore, this project component aims to study mammal diversity in different farming systems across the socio-ecological landscape. And since mammals is a diverse group, we have used tree sampling methodology. And first is medium and large size mammals. And for this, we have used camera traps. And we have gridded the study area into 2x2 square kilometers and use systematic random sampling. And we do not use baits for this study. And for data analysis, we use Digicam for taking images after after identifying the species. And also we use R packages such as CamTrap R and Vegan for data management, visualization, and analysis. And so we have set up 223 camera traps in total across 15 different sites in the socio-ecological landscape. And from this, we have captured 29 species of mammals. Although most of our captures are generally species, however, there are species such as the Chinese pangolin, which is critically endangered. And looking at the community parameters, we have four types of farming system: terraced cultivation system, and large cardamom agroforestry system, farm-based agroforestry system, and tea cultivation system. Although, as you can see from this table, the species richness differs across site, but if you look at the graph below, which is a species accumulation curve, the species accumulation curve asymptote only for tea cultivation system, meaning that we have recorded almost all the species present in tea cultivation systems. However, in the other three farming systems, the curve is yet to asymptote. So we have used two estimators of this. Jackknife is a better estimator with less error. So if you see here, like most of the species richness here is more or less similar. And another aspect of the research that we do is comparing anthropogenic disturbance against mammal activity. And here, and by anthropogenic disturbance, we mean images of humans and domestic animals captured in the camera trap. So when we compare them across a gradient, we found that only 10 species showed significant effect when analyzed using one-way ANOVA. Upon further inspection, we found that only 3 species have significant correlation with anthropogenic disturbance. And if you see the graph on the side for Indian jackal, you can see that there's a lot of overlap. That is the gray area between the activity of humans and the Indian jackal, which means Indian jackals have high tolerance for human activity, while others such as wild boar, although they are known to be active during the day, it seems they have undergone behavioral adaptation by being active mostly at night. And now we'll go to bats. And for bats, we have used mist nets for sampling. And Also, for identifying sampling locations, we have used active detectors such as this one. And for setting up mist nets, for identifying sites for setting up mist nets. And for this also, we haven't used baits. And the other thing that we did was we used passive detector for recording bat echolocation calls. And for data analysis, we use the software called Kaleidoscope, which is freely available, and this is used for visualizing and identification of echolocation calls. And so we have captured 12 species of bats from 10 sites. And if you see closely, the tea cultivation systems and agroecosystems have more or less similar species, have similar species richness. However, some of the species in its farming systems are distinct. And so we also have initiated analyzing bat echolocation calls. And here is an example of a spectrogram of bat echolocation calls. The A, which is for Hipposideros armiger, and B is for Rhinolophus lapidus. And how do we identify this? We use existing literature on in the landscape, and also the calls recorded when they were released were also used to identify the species. And then coming on to small mammals, we use Sherman traps for capturing small mammals, and we use and for every study site we have 6 sampling points, 1 in the forest area, and 3 in the forest area, and 3 in the agriculture systems. And we have in total recorded 8 species of small mammals, and in tea cultivation systems, we have recorded 7 species, and in agroecosystems, we have 6 species. And there's a lot of overlap between species composition in these two farming systems. So what are the implications of our findings? Firstly, we could confirm from our findings that socio-ecological landscape are very crucial for mammal conservation, and it accounts for about 31% of mammals found in the Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya landscape. And from this, when we compare species of conservation concern from the landscape against our records, 48% of the species of we have recorded 48% of species of conservation concern. And if you look at the table here, most of our records are of least concern. However,
okay, is this the last slide?
Oh yeah, this is the last second slide. Okay.
Okay.
So
okay, so please.
okay. Oh, okay, sir. So as other studies have suggested, we can use umbrella species for promoting conservation. Umbrellas, for this, we could select species which are more widespread, because the habitat that they cover would also protect a wider range of species. And
Okay, Mr. Naulak, so thank you for your
okay.
nice presentation. I think
Yeah.
you're running out of time. So thank you very much. It was a nice
Thank you.
presentation. The next speaker, Mr. Roshan Tamang, is also a PhD student of Sikkim University, and he'll be talking about herpetofaunal assemblage and different socio-ecological landscape of Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya. So, Mr. Roshan Tamang, are you ready?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, sir. So today I'm about to present herpetofaunal assemblage in different socio-ecological landscape of Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya. So herpetofauna consists of 2 creeping taxa, amphibians and reptiles. And because of the diverse habitat of herpetofauna and dual mode of life, especially in amphibians, they are also considered as ecological indicators, natural pest control, and helps in maintaining ecological balance, as they are the link between the higher vertebrates and the lower vertebrates, because they act as a prey and also a predator. They are high susceptibility to climate change because They are very sensitive. They are ectothermic animal and very sensitive to temperature. Apart from this, they are one of the least studied groups. And in case of Himalayas, only a few studies were conducted in Herpetofaunal before, but recently the trend is increasing. They occupy a wide range of habitat, including human-modified landscape, and majority of Herpetofauna are present in human-modified landscape. In Sikkim, past studies has recorded 44 species of amphibians and 88 species of reptiles. Today, I am going to present herpetofaunal diversity in socio-ecological production landscape, documentation, and conservation. For sampling, we have used visual encounter survey for reptiles, and for amphibians, we have used night stream survey. There are many species that are nocturnal, so they are not sighted during daytime. So we have also tried to adopt nocturnal route cruising accompanied with the night visual encounter survey. We have also used opportunistic searches in order to strengthen the species diversity of a particular area, but we have not included opportunistic searches results during analysis. Coming to the community parameters of reptiles and amphibians, in terms of species richness, agroecosystem were found to be the most richest, that were followed by tea plantation system and agropastoral. Same trend were also followed by diversity and abundance. A total of 49 species of herpetofauna were recorded, and 1,110 number of individuals were recorded, and out of which 7 snake species were recorded through opportunistic searches. So those were the alpha diversity. Now coming to beta diversity, we also wanted to know the diversity as we move from the system to the nearby forest. So we did beta diversity, and beta we have opted incident-based disability index for this, and these have two components: turnover, which is the species replacement component, and nestedness, which refers to the species loss. So nestedness component contributed maximum in case of agropastoral system, whereas turnover component contributed maximum in case of agroecosystem and tea cultivation system. We also compile all the family data and made this chart. And in terms of species richness, a family Colubridae was found to be the most rich, and the least was the Lymphopidae. In terms of abundance, the most abundant family was the Cincidae, and the least was the Anguidae. And in case of amphibians also, the nestedness contributed maximum in case of agropastoral system, and also in case of agroecosystem. But in case of tea cultivation, turnover component, that is the species replacement, contributed maximum, which can be because of the monoculture of the tea cultivation and the differences between the forest and the system. In the family-wise chart, in terms of species richness, Dicroclosidae family was found to be the richest, and the least was the Bufonidae family. In terms of abundance, family Ranidae was found to be the richest one, and the least was the Bufonidae family. We also recorded many conservation concerned species, out of which was the Tachydermus sikkimensis. This species was earlier discovered by Gunther in the early 90s, after which this species was considered to be an invalid species by other researchers, but in 2009, it was again revalidated from Sikkim, and now IUCN has recently listed this species as an endangered species. And this species has a very narrow and restricted range, and these are generally found in the pockets, small pockets of tea cultivation system and agroecosystem in the lower belts of Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya. And this region where these species are found is undergoing through a various developmental pressure lately, and because of which this species can have serious impact in future. The other species is Oligodon juclandifer. These species also found only in agro ecosystem rather than forest, and this is also listed as vulnerable, and this species has a very patchy distribution as well. The other species, Trichaceum guntheri, it is only found, majority of this species is found in agropastoral system, and this is also listed as vulnerable. And all these species have a very restricted range, and they are found outside protected areas. Majority of them are found outside protected areas. So in order to conserve them, special measures and conservation policies are required in order to sustain their future. During our survey, we also came across extraction by the locals. So we wanted to know the perception behind the amphibian extraction. So we surveyed several people, those who were involved in extraction. 70% of them did extraction for the delicacy, and 25% did for the medicinal purpose, whereas 5% did for recreational purposes. The extraction has a serious impact on the amphibian population, because local community, they used to spare breeding females during extraction. So it was the traditional knowledge of them that they spare breeding females during extraction process. But the recent trends suggest that the population, the floating population, that majority of them came in this region for various developmental works, they extract amphibians very rampantly, and they don't spare these breeding females also. So this can lead to the serious decline in the local population as well. So these are the species that were smoke dried, and here we can see some of the rare species which are not common, like Amalops formosus and Amalops himalayanus. And also, these are the traps that we found during our night stream survey, which were made by locals in one of our study sites. These are the representative species of amphibians in socio-ecological systems. These are the reptiles, representative reptile species that we found in different socio-ecological systems. So Herpetofauna, they are very habituated to the human modified landscape, and majority of them, they are present in socio-ecological landscape rather than forest. For example, terrace rice cultivation system supports various amphibian and reptile diversity, like Tias species, like Phaseria species, Xenocrophis species. They fits under the rodents and acts as a natural pest control for the terrace rice cultivation system. Similarly, in case of cardamom agroecosystem, this cardamom agroecosystem forms the litter bed that traps moisture and also warmth, and they are an ideal habitat for many reptiles and amphibians like the mountain pit viper, Obophis monticola, and also Himalayan pit viper, Protobothrops himalayanus, and also Trichaceum guntheri. But in recent years, the cardamom agroecosystem in this region has been declining very rapidly, because people have shifted their livelihood to other sources like tourism, and they have started less cardamom, so they are no more cultivating cardamom. The species like Amalops species, Megaphris species, and Nanorana species, they are generally adapted to fast-flowing river system, because they have well-digit sucker in their digits as well as in the mouth of the tadpoles. But these fast-flowing torrent stream are these days altered, because of which this species is facing difficulty in adjusting in other kinds of
Mr. Roshan,
so
Mr. Roshan, is this the last slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is this the last slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So
please conclude.
They are very vulnerable to habitat destruction, because they have a very low dispersal rate, and apart from that, they are also being extracted, and many anthropogenic pressures are there. And the socio-ecological landscape across this region are facing various developmental pressures, like the pharmaceuticals and tourism influx. So those phenomenon has created in the habitat destructions of this species. And apart from this,
Yes, Mr. Tamang, I think
Okay, sir.
If this is the last slide, I think you have concluded your topic.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So it was a nice presentation, nice findings.
Thank you, sir.
So I invite with this the next speaker. Hello, Bishal. So please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Today I will be presenting on bird communities in different socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. Next slide. So as we know, that socio-ecological landscape, which is a complete mixture of human settlement, agricultural system, along with natural habitat, covers almost 38% of the planet's land masses. And earlier, these were considered only as production system. However, recent studies have found rich biodiversity within the socio-ecological landscapes as well. And studies have also found that agroecosystem is an important conservation zone for avifaunal community as well. And studies in India, especially Western Himalaya, have recorded more bird species richness and abundance in low intensity and mixed agriculture than primary forest. And in winters, 80% of the bird species found in the primary forest had equal or higher abundance in agricultural lands. So with this background, next slide, please. With this background, we formulated two main objectives for our study. The first one is to understand the avian diversity trends in different socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. And the second one is to compare the bird communities found in agricultural system with their respective forest gradients. Now, coming to the methodology part, next slide, please. We selected 13 study sites, which were broadly divided into agro-ecosystem, agro-pastoral system, and tea cultivation system. For sampling birds, standard point count methods were used, where in each site, 2 transects of 1 kilometer each were laid, and in each transect, 8 permanent points were marked using locus map, and 2 points were spaced 150 meters apart from each other to avoid repetitive sampling of same individuals. And we sampled birds across all the sites, covering 4 major seasons, that is pre-monsoon, monsoon, post-monsoon, and winter. And secondly, we also collected some secondary data, such as life history traits through standard secondary resources and personal field observations. Next slide. So sample data were pooled and computed, and different community parameters, both alpha and beta diversity, were analyzed across different landscapes. We have recorded 9,212 individuals of 226 species across the landscapes. Additionally, we compared the patterns of parameters recorded in agricultural system with their respective secondary forest patches. We have found that species richness, abundance, diversity, all the alpha community parameter of in agroecosystem were found to be higher than their respective forest patch. This may be due to the fact that agroecosystem, with its complex vegetation structure and habitat heterogeneity, harbors more birds, avifauna richness in the system. However, in agropastoral forest patch comparison, as well as tea cultivation forest patch comparison, contrasting trend was observed. And similar trend was observed in beta diversity, as all the in all the system forest comparison, beta diversity trend was in most of the system, it was more than 50%, which tells us that species composition were different in agricultural system as compared to the forest patch system. Next slide, please. We also tried to compare different life history traits, such as habitat utilization, foraging stratum, and feeding guild. And we have found that in comparison of habitat utilization between agricultural system with their nearby forest patch, agroecosystem harbored more forest specialist species as compared to the forest patch. Similarly, forest patch had higher forest specialist species as compared to their agricultural system. And finally, forest pets had higher forest specialist and open land species than their tea cultivation system. Next slide, please. Similarly, when we compare the foraging stratum between agricultural system and nearby forest patch, we have found that agro-ecosystem indeed had higher canopy species rather than the secondary forest patch. And similarly, forest patch had higher understory species than agro-ecosystem. Next slide, please. Now, when we compare the feeding yield between agricultural system with their secondary forest patch, we have found that insectivorous species was found to be higher in tea cultivation system as compared to their nearby secondary forest patch. On the other hand, forest patch had higher frugivores as compared to the agro-ecosystem. Next slide, please. So we again try to look at one of the major aspect of birds, that is ecosystem services provided by birds, that is pest control services. When we look at the patterns of feeding yields in different agricultural systems, we have found that in all three systems, insectivorous species contributed more than 60% of the species richness in all three systems. And NMHS analysis also showed that insectivorous species were found to be dominant species across the landscapes. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we are now undertaking one of the major experiments, that is bird excluder experiments in the tea cultivation landscapes of Darjeeling and Sikkim Himalaya. And through this experiment, we are trying to identify important and high abundant insectivorous bird species and their role in biocontrol services. So this is an ongoing experiment, and the results still needs to be analyzed. Thank you. And the next slide, please. So we also recorded many conservation concern species from the agricultural land itself. We recorded 3 species endemic to Himalaya and 1 species listed in the IUCN vulnerable category species. And along with it, we also recorded 7 species listed in CITES Appendix 2 category species from the agricultural land itself. Next slide, please. So in the conclusion, we have observed that higher or equal diversity of agricultural system in birds were found as compared to the forest patch. Beta diversity analysis also revealed the fact that agricultural systems are indeed different in species composition than forest patch. We have also seen the dominance of insectivores, and it may act as an important biological pest control agent, especially in the organically cultivated agricultural system of Sikkim Himalaya. And as mentioned by Dr. T.R. Shankar-Raman sir, land sharing and land sparing strategies which were highly debated over the past few decades. So both land sharing and land sparing have benefits and its own limitation, and using both strategies in tandem may be the most effective going forward in socio-ecological system of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya, India. Thank you. Next slide. These are my acknowledgements, and thank you.
Okay, Bishal, thank you very much. So you were very well in time. Is Dr. Sailendra Dewan ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry for the technical error that was there. Hope my slide is visible.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, sir. So shall I start?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and respected chairperson of the session. I'd like to start my presentation on butterfly and ordinary community in different land use system of socio-ecological landscape in Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya. So insects with several taxa are an important part of ecosystem since they perform variety of ecological function here, and in the agriculture system, they are economically important group of taxa with both negative as well as positive benefits. More importantly, they are an important indicator of land use pattern and environment health. And among all of the insect taxa, butterfly in terrestrial environment and odonats in the aquatic environment has been widely studied because of their well-resolved taxonomy and because they are easy to sample. So in the Himalayan region, such as Sikkim and Darjeeling, also studies on both of these taxa have accelerated since past many years, and with that, several rare and even new species have been discovered, especially from socio-ecological landscape, indicating that perhaps this landscape may have a huge potential for their conservation. But since inventories of this taxa are less from the ACL, we set out our objectives to assess the butterfly and ordinate diversity in the ACLs and to compare species diversity as well as assemblage between the different habitats. With this, we set out to explore several ACLs in Sikkim and Darjeeling Himalaya. These are the pictures, and each of these ecosystems, we selected agricultural landscape, and for the control site, we selected forest habitat. Now, this forest habitat are also part of the ACLs and not the protected areas or any reserve forest. And forest as a control site for sampling butterfly. And after the sampling sites were selected, we used a fixed width point count method. A method that is quite suitable for rugged mountain terrain such as Sikkim and Darjeeling for sampling butterflies. For ordinates also, we followed a similar approach by selecting the streams and water channels, that is the habitat of ordinates, the dragonfly and the damselfly in both agricultural landscape and forest. And after selecting those sites, we used a contact count method to sample ordinates. Data analysis included assessment of sampling completeness, calculation of alpha diversity of species within a, that is the diversity of species within a local scale, and in this case, different land use system, and also calculation of beta diversity, that is the variation in species composition and abundances between two systems here, in this case, between agricultural land and forest habitat in each of the ACLs. And to find the significance of the variation that has been observed in the diversity, we used a simple test such as t-test and also several ordination techniques. Now moving on to results, we recorded around 2,751 species of butterflies represented, individuals of butterflies representing 186 species and of 6 families after completion of 1,440 point count. We also recorded several conservation priority species enlisted under Wildlife Protection Act 1972. This graph shows sampling completeness at it is reaching asymptote in most of the cases. The rate of addition of species would have been quite less, even if we have sampled more, thus indicating the completion of sample and indicating that the species that we have got would have been adequate for comparative purposes. And this trend we saw in all of the ACLs. So we observed that the richness and abundance per point of butterflies were higher in agricultural landscape as compared to the forest habitat, but contrastingly, as you can see in the table, the diversity were lower in agricultural landscape as compared to the forest, and this is probably due to the dominance of species which are adapted to open habitats, such as one given in this picture. In this Venn diagram shows the trend in variation of species composition between forest and agricultural landscape, and that is measured as the Sorensen diversity index, that is the beta diversity. And in all of the ACLs, we observed that the variation did not exceed 50% for butterflies, indicating that there are overlap of many species. But even though we found that the major contribution of this differences was basically due to turnover, which is the measure of replacement of species by another species from one side to another. For example, the grizzly bear being replaced by polar bear as we move up the latitude towards the Arctic in the Americas. So nested net, on the other hand, which reflects species loss due to habitat degradation, did not have much contribution, indicating that ACLs were rather healthy in terms of butterfly composition. So the plot on the left of shows the overlap of community in different habitats, but even though here we see that some of the transects has quite a huge difference, probably due to the difference in microhabitat condition that exists in those transects. And for trait composition, we selected the feeding breadth of butterflies, since the data are more available for this trait. And as for the feeding breadth, butterflies are categorized as number 1, monophagous species that feed on plant of only one genus, number 2, oligophagous species that feed on plant of different genus but on the same species, and polyphagous species that feed on different group of species of plant irrespective of genus and families. In conservation point of view, the monophagous species are more important because they are highly specialized in their diet. And here I'd like to draw your attention to this green histogram plot. This shows that the monophagous species, except for the agropastoral landscape, in both in terms of richness and abundance, the monophagous species were more in the forest habitat, the one marked in yellow in each of the ACLs. Moving on to the ordinates, we recorded around 2,850 individuals of species, representing representing 52 species of two suborders, the dragonflies and the damselflies, after covering 120 transit count. And in the agropastoral system, we recorded only one species, one given in this picture, Orthopterm japonicum, and because of that, we did not do any further analysis for this ACL. And here we see that we recorded higher diversity, abundance, and richness in the agricultural landscape. And this is this graph shows the asymptote quite similar to that of butterfly, indicating that further addition of sample would have only added few species altogether. So now the difference that we observed in diversity is reflected in the family level composition of ordinate, with family Lilobi that represents dragonfly fairly more abundant and species rich in agricultural landscape, whereas on the forest we observed that the family Platycnemidae that represents the damselfly were more abundant. A similar trend was observed in tea cultivation as well. So here this variation in species composition ordinates were higher as compared to the butterflies, but here also the most of the contribution was done by the turnover. Now the plot on the left shows fair overlap, but not much for tea cultivation. This and this one in the tea cultivation system, indicating that the habitat had slightly different species composition. So we recorded around 25.56% of butterflies from Sikkim Himalaya and 37.55% from the Darjeeling Himalaya. That is a fairly high number of species that has been recorded till now, and 20.81% of ordinates that has been recorded from Sikkim and Darjeeling till now. So both ordinates and butterflies show different pattern of diversity, probably due to the differences in their ecologies. But what we observed in common was that even though there are overlap of species within the habitat in forest and as well as agricultural habitat, there are species which are fairly adapted to particular habitat. The turnover component shows that, and also the surrounding forest habitat had more specialist species as seen in ordinate family level analysis or the feeding breath analysis of the butterfly. So, therefore, the landscape mosaics that occurs in the ACLs create a unique habitat that facilitates different group of species to thrive in those habitat, at least for butterflies and ordinates, and most importantly, forest patches, which is also part of the ACLs. An important land use system because the local community draw several benefits from that, act as a refuge for specialist species of this invertebrates specifically, and this can be complemented as a next to protected areas, especially in the lower elevation where protected areas are generally less in number. The area protected areas are less. And of course, the heterogeneity, the landscape mosaics altogether contribute to the overall richness, the regional pool, the gamma diversity of butterflies in this and ordinates in this region.
Yes, Dr.
So,
please wind up.
Yes, sir. Finished. What more remains to be seen is the role of different spatial and environmental factors, at least from the researcher's perspective. But more important is the awareness of the local communities about this lesser known animal group and the benefit that they hold, for example, pollination and pest control. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for your nice presentation. And I think I will now invite the next speaker, Mr. Aditya Pradhan. He is a PhD student with ATREE, Sikkim and Calcutta University. So he talks about values associated with ecosystem services in the socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalayas. So Aditya, so please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be talking on values associated with ecosystem services in the socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. So the socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya are characterized by agricultural lands which are interspersed with privately managed forests which fall outside protected areas. And the local communities residing in these landscapes depend on the ecosystem services retained here for social, cultural, ecological, and economic well-being. And this has driven them to conserve these landscapes over the years. Thus, it is very important to identify important ecosystem services and values associated with them so as to comprehend and realize benefits provided by them. Therefore, involving the local communities and stakeholders through a combination of socio-cultural and economic valuation when specifying values to ecosystem services may help in formulating socially justifiable policies, which in turn may help in conservation of ecosystems in the longer run. The objectives of the current study were to explore the priorities and perceptions of local communities associated with ecosystem services retained in the socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya and to assess the community perceived economic value of highly prioritized ecosystem services. The study was carried out in 31 villages at an elevation of 500 to 2500 meter above sea level across 15 spatially different sites in the Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya, covering two important land use systems, namely the agro-ecosystem and the tea cultivation system. In the initial part of the project, we conducted institutional surveys and inception meetings, which were used to identify key informants who were later approached during focus group discussions.
Aditya, I think you need to adjust your mic. Is he audible to everybody?
Yes.
Is he audible to
Sir,
everyone?
he's audible to us, sir.
Okay. So please carry on.
Okay, thank you, sir. During the focus group discussions, we used participatory rural appraisal tools to assess community priorities and values associated with ecosystem services, and to also assess the community perceived trends in availability of ecosystem services provided by the socio-ecological landscapes. To achieve the objects of the study, we used two different approaches. One was the socio-cultural valuation approach, and the other one was the economic valuation approach. Data were collected by means of focus group discussions, where participatory rural appraisal tools like listing and ranking were used to list important ecosystem services and rank them according to community priorities. This was later used to calculate weighted priority values on a scale of 1 to 20. Similarly, for the economic valuation, current annual cost of maintenance or uses of ecosystem services and relevant and identification of relevant ecosystem services were done using key informant interviews and focus group discussions, and the information was later used to design an effective choice experiment. During the key informant interviews, we found that there are no direct annual costs that the local communities pay for maintenance or use of ecosystem services. So we used voluntary participation in maintenance of ecosystem, which was in terms of labor payment and the voluntary participation of local communities for cleaning water sources and planting trees, or doing other activities that in turn help in maintaining the surrounding ecosystem. And this was found to be 6 days or 1200 rupees per person per year as a payment. So through focus group discussions, we identified 4 relevant ecosystem services, one for each category, and these were provision for fuel load, regulation of water, habitat for biodiversity, and cultural landscape. These were used in choice experiment, and an example of choice set used during the household survey has been shown here. Since 405 combinations were possible, we used only 28 choice sets using a fractional factorial method using software Sasham. During the study, we identified 28 ecosystem services recognized by the local community members, among which 12 were provisioning services. And among the provisioning services, fresh water, fuel hood, and fodder were identified in all the 37 FGDs that were conducted during the study. Similarly, 8 regulating services were identified, among which fresh air regulation, was identified in the maximum number of FGTs, while soil protection and disease control were only identified in 2 and 1 FGTs, which shows that the local communities found it difficult to identify complex regulating services. Similar was the case in case of supporting services, where only one ecosystem service, that is habitat for wild animals, was recognized. And this shows that the local communities found it very difficult to identify services due to technicalities involved in classification of these services. Lastly, 7 cultural services were identified, among which sense of place, which was described as a deep sense of belongingness to the place where ancestors lived and they were brought up, was found to be the most important cultural service. And this relates to well-being and cultural vitality. Bar graph here shows 10 highly prioritized individual ecosystem services, and all of these were related to well-being values. And it was found that freshwater and freshwater regulation were the 2 most highly prioritized ecosystem services among the 28 ecosystem services. And this shows the importance of freshwater in rural well-being. Interestingly, it was found that the local communities across the study area prioritize regulating services over other services, which is contrary to the popular belief that people in rural settings prioritize provisioning services over other services. And this shows an advanced level of understanding and awareness among the local community members. And this can be attributed to numerous knowledge building programs that are carried out in the study. When we asked the participants of the focus group discussions about the trends in availability of ecosystem services over the years, we found that the community perceived declining trends in a number of provisioning services, while other services were found to be not declining over the years. This shows that the local communities observe only those services which they regularly use for their well-being. It was also found that in some FGDs, they reported that the availability of ecosystem services may have increased over the years, and this may be associated with planting of multi-purpose trees in agricultural spaces in the landscape. As a result of the choice experiment conducted during the survey, we found that fresh water regulation was found to be the most highly prioritized ecosystem service, and the people were willing to pay more for this service, followed by fuel and habitat for biodiversity. The total economic value per person per year was calculated to be 1,571.2 rupees annually, and this may sound very small, but going by the annual income of the family, this is a considerable amount for them. The study found differences in.
You will have
Okay, sir.
to.
The study.
Wind up.
Okay, the study was found to found differences in perception across the villages, and this relates to diversified livelihoods. And lastly, the freshwater regulation and provision were found to be the most highly prioritized services through both the approaches, and this shows the need for better policies for freshwater in the region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aditya, for your very nice presentation. And so we'll be inviting the questions at the end of the session as we decided. In the meantime, so I invite Dr. Jins VJ, the research associate with Sikkim University, and he talks about building capacity in biodiversity monitoring and conservation of socio-ecological landscapes of Darjeeling and Sikkim Himalaya. So Dr. Jins.
Okay, thank you. And as mentioned by Dr. Bhoj in the introduction of the project, apart from documenting biodiversity and ecosystem services, we have capacity building as one of the important components of the project. And I'll be discussing about that. So why it is important to build capacities for socio-ecological landscapes. As we see in all previous presentations, these landscapes are in constant human interactions, and because of this, they are susceptible to rapid changes. So along with documenting biodiversity values, awareness to local communities is also very important. And a continuous monitoring is essential for planning any conservation actions in this socio-ecological landscapes. So it is very important to build capacities within this region for monitoring these changes, because the people who live in this region has to understand how important is the system, and they have to come forward for protecting the values of this landscape. So regional capacities, including students, researchers, and local people, can contribute better for protecting these socio-political systems. So we had a different kind of capacity building programs in the project. It starts from our inception awareness programs, then training workshops for different group of people, including students, researchers, local communities. And we provided dissertation supports to master students, and internships and PhD support to project fellows. And we established seed banks, and we produced protocol and knowledge products. I'll go into like details of these activities. So we started our project with inception meetings in all the study sites, and we started this meeting first with the regional meetings, one for Sikkim and another for Darjeeling region, and then we conducted meetings at each sites to make people aware of this project activities and the importance of protecting socio-ecological landscapes. Then we had different awareness programs related to important days associated with biodiversity and environment. We conducted different programs, including campaigns and some webinars during the COVID time. It covered different biodiversity topics, starting from awareness about pollinators in the socio-ecological landscapes, then the butterfly diversity and distribution pattern of in Sikkim, and also about pangolins. And these were the important awareness programs we had in the project. And then when it comes to training workshops, we had especially for the students and researchers in the region, we started with a workshop on data collection and database management and sampling design for students and researchers in the region. This was 4 or 5 days of workshop, and we had a series of different workshops on biodiversity components and study design. For example, we had a workshop on ordonnates, and then workshop on bats and small mammals, and these were participated by more than 20 people for the ordonate workshop, and 10 participants were intensively trained for the bats and small mammal workshop. And then we had a very detailed workshop to familiarize with R software. And then we had different workshops, and apart from researchers, we conducted one field-based training workshop for students, which was conducted in North Sikkim, Zungu, North Sikkim. And in this workshop, we trained school students, especially school students, on how to document biodiversity in socio-ecological landscape, and also to understand the values in biodiversity of socio-ecological landscape. Then we also had an online research seminar during the COVID lockdown time, in which regional researchers, including our project fellows, could present their research findings, and got a training on presenting their findings. And we also had training workshops on documenting biodiversity for local communities to make them aware of how to document biodiversity in their own locality. So we had a butterfly walk documentation, and a nature guide and biodiversity documentation, and the tree plantation drive, and these programs were conducted in Makavadi. And we also had a workshop on data collection using different tools which was conducted in West Sikkim. Then apart from these biodiversity documentation, since the socio-political landscapes are very important for different livelihood options for the community, we also conducted livelihood trainings for local communities. It included apiary management and also regarding environmental friendly agricultural practices, and also orientation on farmstay operation and community-based tourism across different study sites. And we also had intensive training workshop on ecotourism in South Sikkim, which was we provided intensive training to the local people on how to manage a homestay and how to conduct ecotourism activities in these landscapes. And apart from these trainings and workshops, we had dissertation supports. And over the years, we supported more than 30 students for different dissertation projects which cover biodiversity, ecology, ethnomedicine, and different aspects. And they have already published 5 research articles from these different MSc dissertation projects. And when it comes to internships, we supported around 17 internships, which involves data collection on bats and small mammals, data collection on agrobiodiversity, and preparation of people's biodiversity register as part of BMCs, and data collection on our database in this project, and data collection on ecosystem services. Then we also supported a PhD of our 5 research scholars, and one of them have already completed, and they are all working on different faunal components in this socio-ecological system, and they will be also able to carry out further research in this landscape. And we established seed banks in 3 villages as part of the project, and this will help in preservation of maintaining local agrobiodiversity, and also it will act as models for other villages to come forward and establish more seed banks in this region. And we also produced protocols for monitoring biodiversity in this region, and also training manuals for environmental friendly agriculture practices. And we supplied posters to give people awareness on biodiversity components, and also we produced land cover land use maps.
Dr. Jins, please wind up.
Yes. And overall, our capacity building programs had a significant impact in the region, and we could reach out to a large number of people and create awareness on the importance of socio-ecological systems. And we provided trainings to students and researchers and local communities in the region on biodiversity documentation and monitoring. And we gave intensive training to researchers on study design and analytical techniques for conduct further studies in these landscapes. And we trained the local communities on different livelihood options associated with socio-ecological systems. And we supported BMCs in documentation of biodiversity and traditional knowledge.
I think
Yeah.
You have already talked about seed banks and all. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the last slide.
Thank you. Yes, done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jins, for very interesting work and nice presentation. So thank you very much. I'll invite now Mr. Rohit George, database coordinator from ATREE Gangtok, and he talks about Mountain Biodiversity Database and Information System, an online resource on biodiversity of Sikkim, Darjeeling, Himalaya. Mr. George, please.
Thank you, sir. So good afternoon, everyone. So up till now, all the researchers and all the presentations have been about either the ecological or the biodiversity elements in the Sikkim-Darjeeling region. So as part of this project, we also had one slightly different, I would say kind of a new component as well, where we decided that researchers, both in ATREE and Sikkim University, we felt that we do a lot of projects and a lot of data is generated, but most of this data very often is only accessible to academics. The results of this research is only published in peer-reviewed journals and things like that. So for the average citizen, for a biodiversity enthusiast or for a school or college student, most of the results of our research is not accessible. So in this project, we tried to do something different. We created an online web database called the Mountain Biodiversity Database and Information System. The URL is mbdis.in. And through this presentation, I'd like to quickly give you a summary of what we have built and what data is available there. Our original plan was twofold. One is we wanted an internal database for all the data generated in the project. In this project, we had 5 JRFs, 5 PhD scholars. We had multiple MSc students doing dissertations. We had a lot of people collecting very different types of data. And for the overall coordination, we created a database, which was a centralized repository of all the data which is generated through the project. At the same time, we also wanted an external facing portal or website. So we decided to marry the two. So in this, through this MBDIS, we coordinated lots of the research and data collection activities of the project. And at the same time, we also tried to curate and make as much of this data available to the public as we could. So the MBDIS has multiple different things. One is it has details about each of the project sites. It has details about the project itself. It has checklists, species checklists under each of the 5 taxa covered in this project. We also have a section on species itself, where we have species descriptions for over 500 species. We have reports and results which were generated to the project. We also have the researchers in the course of the research did a lot of literature review and generated a lot of data, starting from species checklists to compiling lists of publications dealing with biodiversity of the region. So all of this information also we have made available through our database. And finally, as one component of this project, we also did a little bit of capacity building and awareness programs with local communities, trying to get them involved in citizen science. So some of the citizen science data is also available in our database. So firstly, this project covers 18 different sites in the Sikkim-Darjeeling Himalaya. So this is across all 6 districts covered. That's 4 districts in Sikkim and Darjeeling and Kalimpong. So on our website, we have both all of the sites categorized according to either agroecosystem, tea cultivation landscape, or agropastoral. Additionally, we have a small write-up about each site itself. So it's a descriptive write-up telling you about the location, about the kind of landscape, a little bit about the communities who live there, etc. Then we have a species section where currently, I believe we have over 1,700 species listed. This is the names of all the species with which are found in the region. This is primarily focused on the 5 taxa we covered, but additionally through some of the dissertations, we got some details on additional species and some plant species as well. For a number of those species, we also were able to compile species descriptions from various literature sources. So here is an example. I've taken a screenshot of the species page for the Khaling pheasant. So we have photographs which were generated through this project, and we also have a description of the species itself. So one of the most interesting and the most vibrant sides of MBDIS in the recent past has been the citizen science component. We conducted a number of workshops. We did 9 workshops where we trained community members about citizen science. So we have a varied audience today. So I'll just give you a quick working definition of citizen science. So citizen science is any scientific activity which is undertaken with the help of common citizens. So the way we do this, our approach to it is to try and document biodiversity using citizens. And we use a platform called iNaturalist.org. There are a few others like eBird or India Biodiversity Portal. So all we ask people to do is take a photograph with their smartphone or their camera, upload it onto iNaturalist with the location and the date, and then the community there will identify it, and that will become a point record for the region. So through citizen science on iNaturalist, we currently have over 17,500 point records of species. Over 2,600 species have been documented, and almost 600 people have participated in this effort so far. So the map on the left shows the various locations or the various sites from which data has been contributed on iNaturalist. And the chart on the right shows the taxonomic breakup of observations. So the vast majority is insects, and followed by birds. We have also seen quite a substantial increase in participation in citizen science from the region after our project. So in this graph, the first point is where our project started. So as you can see, citizen science did show a generally increasing trend. But since our project started, and especially since we started doing citizen science workshops, the number of citizen science contributions have exploded. That said, in citizen science or in lots of these online participatory efforts, we have this, there is a concept called the long tail, where the vast majority of a small percentage of users contribute a large proportion of the data. So here as well, we had 5% of the users contributed. So 5% means that's about 25 users contributed almost 70% of all the observations. So we have 188 users who've uploaded only one observation so far. But that said, we also have a handful of users who contributed over 1,000 records themselves. So as the next step, since our project has officially ended, we believe this database can be of immense use to students and biodiversity enthusiasts and can be a useful repository of biodiversity from this region. So the Department of Zoology, Sikkim University and ATREE will continue to host this database even after the project. And we will update this with information, either update the data which is already there with new information as it comes in, or add more checklists, add more information from which is collected through other projects that we'll do in the future. We also plan to continue conducting citizen science and awareness workshops in the region. As a few outcomes from this, especially during the lockdown period, there were a few events which were organized. There was one called the Big Butterfly Month, which happened in 2020 and 2021. So we got people from all over the Sikkim-Darjeeling region to photograph butterflies and upload it on iNaturalist. Now, Aditya Pradhan, who spoke earlier, another researcher called Prayash from Darjeeling, and me, we are planning to come out with a small field guide on moths from the region, just based on all the data which is collected by citizens. So this is an area which we feel isn't explored enough, getting more common people involved in biodiversity documentation, and hopefully through MBDIS and similar efforts, we can do more of this in the future. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has at the end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. George. Thank you for your nice presentation. And now we'll have the last speaker for the session, Dr. Sarala Khaling. So she's the Regional Director at Sikkim, and she'll be talking about policy insights for socio-ecological landscapes in Darjeeling-Sikkim Himalaya. Dr. Sarala Khaling, so please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for staying with us, even though the session is very, very long. So I'm just going to be talking very, very briefly about some insights for policy in the socio-ecological landscapes. I will talk about our experience, but I think it's going to be broad because it also pertains to many other landscapes in the Himalaya. This morning, we've heard a lot about and I can't emphasize more that, biodiversity is, the socio-ecological production landscape is a repository of biodiversity, and biodiversity is not just in the protected areas. or in the reserved forest or in these, areas which are conserved. So I think everybody has emphasized on that, the researchers to the experts, and even in the keynote address. So in this project, as you can see, even from the looking at the sites that we worked in, and I'll show this slide, which Aditya showed before, is we are talking about 4 different diverse landscapes. For example, in Sikkim-Darjeeling, there are these large cardamom-based agroforestry. Then there is the terrace rice cultivation, which has its own biodiversity elements. Then tea plantations have their own, and farm-based agroforestry systems. So we live in a socio-ecological production landscape, which is itself very, very diverse. So it is so much more diverse in these socio-ecological production landscape, which is outside protected areas, where protected areas may have a certain type of a forest ecosystem or different kinds of forest ecosystems, but equally diverse ecosystems exist even outside the protected areas. So I want to contextualize. So if you look at, even if you just take the agropastoral systems, there are several kinds of agropastoral systems that you can see. Even within an agropastoral system, there are smaller, different patches of ecosystems. So also, if you look at the agro ecosystems, when we look at these, which is the riverine, but also, with these paddy cultivation, then we look at paddy cultivation and forested. Then this is the cardamom ecosystem, which is an agroforestry system with the shade trees. And then we have these integrated farming systems, which you can see on my right. And also with tea, in tea, we also distinctly see that there are these systems where there are hardly any shade trees, or with shade trees which are only in these gullies or in these valleys, smaller valleys, or where there are these springs and spring sheds. Also, but there are tea gardens which have set out, a whole lot of forests for these tea garden ecosystems. So I think it is like we have mentioned, there's so much of diversity. There is a mosaic of habitats. And so we really need to look at policy from a different perspective. So what we did as a policy input for conservation and management recommendations from the project, I think Dr. Bhoj has already mentioned, we took all the data that we got from the students, from the researchers, from the citizen science work that we did, and we held these district and village cluster level consultations, asking people, you have these repositories, this much of biodiversity in your villages, in your rural system. So using the most simplest of words, and we were saying, like, what can we do to conserve and manage this? So we did that. We also did state level consultations. So in Sikkim's Darjeeling, we have not been able to do, but in Sikkim, we did a state level consultation with all stakeholders, saying that this is the kind of biodiversity we have in our production landscape. So how do we go about? And then we did a policy recommendation document on conservation of biodiversity in agroecosystems, which is based on results and public consultations. We also had expert consultations done. And there is a draft policy document which has been drafted, and it's still being finalized. It's still being made more neat and more catered to the landscape. But beyond this project, I would want to talk about more the broader aspect of policy formulation or a policy framework for this kind of a landscape that we are talking about. And it may be useful not only in the Darjeeling and Sikkim landscape, but for all the landscape across the Himalayas. So there are there are models out there that, we can follow when we do this policy framework, because after all, we'll have to be asking what sort of a policy framework can these landscape have. So one of the well-known one is also the high conservation value areas. And we've ATREE has done this landscape approach work for the government of Sikkim, for the Forest Department of Sikkim, by trying to identify high conservation value areas in socio-ecological landscapes, which was done actually by the Forest Stewardship Council. Earlier, it was for lumber, timber, and all that. But now they've also started identifying natural habitats with outstanding biological, ecological values. And this is more like a landscape approach and based on which we could base our policy framework. Also, it not only deals with biological diversity, but also social and cultural values, which I think are very, very important components. Unlike in these sacrosanct areas like protected areas or reserve forest, I think the social and the cultural values come out to be most important for the people living there, for the people who modify these landscapes, for the people who make decisions on how these landscapes are going to be tomorrow, or how the biodiversity and ecosystem services are going to be there tomorrow or not. So I think this is also a widely used landscape mapping, conservation and natural resource planning and advocacy kind of a framework that we can follow. And the criteria is ecosystem, species, habitat, and it is very biodiversity based. And one thing about this kind of a potential model is it's of a very large scale. So like a large landscape that we did between, say, entire Sikkim and the 2 hilly districts of the state of West Bengal. I think this also can be used as a following as a framework to do a policy framework, basically. We can also take, and tomorrow we'll be hearing more about the Satoyama concept, but I think this is also a potential model, and which also has a very landscape approach for these kind of production landscapes, where, you know, it's a Japanese word for referring to socio-ecological production landscapes and seascapes. And again, it is a mosaic of diverse land uses and ecosystems. It's shaped through sustainable human interactions. And one important thing is it doesn't include any designation of sites, because sometimes these socio-ecological production landscapes, there is sometimes if you give them a designation and then there's a department involved, then there is this thing about people feeling that, you know, oh, the landscape is being, you know, partitioned off by some department or something like that. So this is also a very important internationally recognized concept, but it does not have to have any, you know, you don't have to design. For example, HCVA and all, they're mapped, they're designated, and usually forest department kind of declares it. So, you know, so these are some of the, this is again one of the potential model which we can use as a framework for a policy design. The other one is also the recently which has come out is the other effective area-based conservation measures, and India has just ratified and accepted this. This has come out from IUCN, and I think now there's a document, and India has also, it has criteria. Now the ministry has come out and brought out criteria about what kind of sites these should be, and they are geographically defined sites, and it's not within a protected area. And it is also for in situ conservation and long-term outcomes. And it's also, and the one thing good about this potential model is also it has cultural, spiritual, and socio-economic and locality relevant values. I think this is very, very important. It has got locality relevant values. And I think the socio-ecological production landscape, when we have to do a policy kind of a framework for them, it cannot be like any other, you know, protected area based kind of a process, but something which has both socio-economic and other locally relevant values. And it also represents a significant step forward in the formal recognition of conservation, which is outside protected areas. And this is also very potential in the sense it is already part of a ministry, and they have already ratified, and they've also brought out a document. One other very important, I think, which the FAO does, it's an agriculture-based kind of a model for this kind of policy framework for this kind of a model, but it is agriculture-based. It is also identifies important socio-ecological landscapes on the line of globally important agriculture heritage systems, because again, these are all agricultural landscape with traditional agriculture in many places. But I think they are a little bit smaller, and these are outstanding landscapes of aesthetic beauty. So it also has multiple, and it also is, kind of promotes these multifunctional landscapes. And I think in the end, this is the kind of policy framework we should have, where these socio-ecological production landscape with its mosaic of habitats, ecosystems, people, the diversity of traditions and culture and, you know, services, they become multifunctional. So this is one. But, you know, despite all these potentials, there are so many challenges that we have realized there is when we are talking about policies like this. One is because what kind of developmental models do we have, okay, in our states or in our region? And if you look at most of our developmental models, they are mostly based on economic development and GDP. And we are very, very GDP focused. So how much, what is the GDP? How much is it going to go down? How much is it going to go up? How much in economic benefits and economic benefits? I think in every discussions that we have, this comes up very, very strongly. Conservation or biodiversity and ecosystem, the moment we mention this, our thoughts, they are very PA based, protected area based, or it's a reserve forest based. And it's also very limited. The moment one talks about biodiversity and ecosystems, all our reference goes to the forest department. So it's just limited to the forest sector. And when we approach even other departments, I think they just want us to go and, approach the government sector. So it's a very single sector, kind of a silo, I would say. And then when we plan our infrastructure in terms of dams or roads or settlement, tourism and all that, our decisions are not planned or designed according, considering biodiversity, not even according to, but a little bit consideration for biodiversity and these life supporting ecosystems, which we can see are there in the landscape, and which our researchers have talked about and our experts have talked about. And even in the agriculture sector, we only talk about how to increase production, and how to increase the land of intensive agriculture. But I think the co-benefits of biodiversity and ecosystem services to agriculture is never recognized, or never is it mainstreamed in any of our policies. So that itself for us is a big challenge. So agriculture is also, again, in places like Sikkim and all, agriculture growth is based on intensive, now slowly, especially Northeast India, as you can see, exotic cash crops. So fruits, and palm oil, which is coming out very, very strongly. Maybe there is a way of doing it sustainably, but we have never heard of that. So this has a wide-ranging impact on the local agrobiodiversity, the local crops, and the wild varieties that RG was talking about in the morning. And then this also affects the food system, then further on nutrition and well-being and everything. And then if you talk, the conversations and discussions are, in most of the time, is also focused more on forests, and we don't recognize that there in our mountains there are these wetlands. And when we talk about wetlands, we only remember the high altitude wetlands, not remembering that we have a mid-hill wetlands, which are equally they have been threatened by, I think, land use change the most, but they form source of water, our springs. Then there's very little consideration of our springs, the rangelands that we are talking about, the pastoral, agro-pastoral, the pastoral ecosystems, the rangeland ecosystems, the grasslands that we have. So these are some of the very, and then agroforestry systems, peats and bogs, fallows, even shifting cultivation. I think Dr. Shankaraman was talking about these fallows and shifting cultivation sites, which are really important for bird diversity and biodiversity. And it also serves different functions as a whole to the landscape. So we never have these kind of considerations, I think, when we are talking about our policies in terms of biodiversity. The other thing is we have a very, very sectoral approach to policy formulation. So forest department will be responsible for their forest, then agriculture and department has their own agenda because they want to increase agricultural output. They want to give more economic benefits. Then tourism department wants more tourism footfalls. They want to build more infrastructure in that same landscape that we're talking about. Then rural development department have their own. Power department is more interested in hydropowers. Food and civil supplies are more interested in supplying, food from outside, and more and more not promoting local food, or promoting agrobiodiversity. And we know public work departments are different. Government schemes and projects are also, if it's NMHS, they just want to build roads and more footpaths and things like that. So these are all very aspirational. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this, but I think somewhere, if we really want these socio-ecological production landscapes, which are so rich in biodiversity, to become really vibrant, and they become a life support system and they support human well-being, then I guess it's time that policies have to consider all these things and at least have some consideration for biodiversity and ecosystem services. And then also, as we all know, all of us know, the process of policy for formulation and involvement of all sectors, both at the verticals and at the horizontal level, there is very little opportunity. Many times we have to, we come across policy, but it's last moment and it comes out only, please give your comments. So and so has brought out this policy. Now we are doing the National Biodiversity Policy Revision. Then there was, before this, there was the Wildlife Protection Act, but we are never part of that policy design or policy formulation process. We are only there when, it is made and we have to only give our comments, and it just becomes too late. But at least for the socio-ecological, these production landscapes, just one more line, production landscapes, we are at this stage where all of us can get together and at least be proactive to, say that these are the kind of things to be considered for these kind of policies outside protected areas. Thank you. So these are my insights. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khaling. Thank you very much for a very clear presentation. And it's already 5 p.m. and I think, so we have to take some questions from the audience. So there have been very nice presentations on diverse aspects of the topic that has been dealt with in this project. So I'm sure there are some questions from the audience. So how do we take them? Yes, audience, please identify yourself and ask your question. Will it be in written form? How
Yes, sir. We should ask them to type it out in the chat, or either raise, or they can raise their hand, or they can raise their hand and we'll unmute them.
Yes, so you can raise your hand, identify yourself, and you can ask your question. Yes, please.
Any hand up?
Not yet.
Yes, please come on.
Okay, Avantika has raised her hand.
There are young students. I can see some PhD scholars. I'm sure they will have some questions.
Unmute Avantika. I have to.
Yes, please.
Did you?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
yes.
You are.
Yes,
My
Avantika,
question
yes.
is to Naulak. He mentioned that there was significant effect of anthropogenic disturbances on around 10 species. I would like him to explain it. How did he find out?
Oh, okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so what we did for that was, you know about relative abundance, right? So we kind of graded the relative abundance, and then like say the ones where it's zero for camera-trap sites, and then and then low would be from 1 to 10, and then 10 to 20, and so on and so forth. It's based on a paper by Ahmed et al., which was published in 2021. And then we did a correlation. We did a one-way ANOVA analysis against anthropogenic disturbance, and then mammals for each specific mammals. So, and that's how we come to know whether anthropogenic disturbance is significant or not for this species. Do I answer your question?
Yes, Avantika, is this clear to you? So did you, Mr. Naulak, did you use some baseline data that?
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, thank you, yeah.
Yes, Avantika, is this clear? Is this clear? So how did they conclude that this is because of the anthropogenic disturbance?
So, sir, she's replied in the chat saying, yes, thank you. So next we have someone called Sharma who's raised their hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. So who is it?
This is Ghanshyam Sharma from
Dr. Sharma. Yes,
Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar,
So, hello to everybody. Namaste. And it was really an interesting session. In fact, the diversity of research and researchers, and the amount of the volume of work that has come out through this project is highly interesting, and I think this will provide a gap for the filling the gap for the entire Himalayan region, and this can be one of the examples for other parts of the Himalaya to continue with working on cultivated systems, because now onwards the scientists, the researchers, the planners, the developmental organizations have realized that, of course, there's a high level of biodiversity in the forest, but also in the cultivated systems. But what I would like to suggest here, it's not a question, but also a suggestion, that we have developed, generated enormous amount of knowledge in terms of data, and now it is also in the website. But on top of that, if we can come out with a few volume of books, maybe 1 or 2 volume of books, which can collate all the information together for researchers, for scientists, for any people who would be interested to use these information as references, it would be very nice. So let me congratulate ATREE as well as the botany geology department, Dr. Acharya, and I would also like to suggest them that if this information can be collated together into a book form, maybe 1 or 2 volume, it would be very nice reference books for the scientists, for the professors, for the students, for all other those who would be interested to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for your comments, for your suggestions, and for your nice words for this work, for this elaborate work, rather. And Dr. Sharma, so he is one of the experts in this field. So thank you, Dr. Sharma. Yes, any other comments, questions? I think last 1 or 2 questions we can take. We're already behind the time. Okay, last 1 question. I think there are no more questions. Mr. George.
Yes, sir, it looks like it.
Can you see somebody?
Nobody, sir.
Okay, so I think then we have to summarize this, and we'll end the session after a while. I think it was a very long session and full of information. So Dr. Bhoj Acharya, so he defined the objectives of the project that was taken up jointly by ATREE and Sikkim University. So a good team of researchers from different backgrounds, different expertise, and pooled expertise, so that led to some good investigations, so which culminated into very good output. So all the objectives, they have been fulfilled nicely, and that is reflected in, among other things, in very good publications. So 7 journal publications. I have seen 1 or 2 publications from Dr. Acharya earlier also, and popular lectures and a lot of things. So they have been done. All the presentations, they were very nice. So everybody prepared well. And so starting from Mr. Naulak, so who talked about mammals, so large-sized, medium-sized, small-sized mammals, and appropriate controls, so they have been maintained. So forest patches, so they were the controls, and then agroeconomic, this AE systems and other systems, so they have been analyzed completely. Then this was followed by the presentation on the reptiles and amphibians. So some very nice niches and habitats that were identified, like terraces, terrace rices, and cardamom, etc., for reptiles and amphibians. Dr. Sailendra Dewan, so he talked about butterflies and autumn age community. And what is very important, that they were able to rediscover a couple of rare species. So that is commendable. And I was wondering, because I was expecting that there will be a comparison of Sikkim Himalayas with Darjeeling Himalayas in terms of chemical-based agriculture and chemical-free agriculture. So at least in this presentation by Dr. Sailendra Dewan, so he pointed out that there were more butterflies in Darjeeling. So I do not know the precise reason, but that is what he presented. Then Bishal Thakuri, so he talked about bird communities, and invariably, so he found their importance in pest biocontrol also. Aditya Pradhan, so he talked about values associated with ecosystem services, so socio-cultural value systems, so provision of water, fuel wood, etc. So well-being and socio-economic values, so they have been assessed in this project. And Dr. Jins, so he talked about capacity building, biodiversity documentation. So involving students and researchers, so many internships, PhD students, they were supported, dissertations were supported, and webinars, because we went through these unprecedented times on account of the COVID pandemic. So webinars were employed for disseminating the knowledge generated. So tree plantations and data collection and management. So seed banks, they were developed. Then Rohit George, so he talked about mountain biodiversity database and information system. So very importantly, so citizen science awareness workshops, they were held. And Dr. Sarala Khaling, so she talked about policy insights, so policy inputs and potential models, they have been discussed. So landscape approach and this Japanese Satoyama model, so that has been talked about. But certainly, so there are challenges also. So when we are talking about, so summing up, so I will say that the investigations, they have been systematic. And as I said, that one of the strengths of this project has been that expertise has been pooled. So people from different backgrounds, horticulture, zoology, ecology, and other backgrounds, so socio-economic backgrounds, so they have pooled the expertise, and that has led to very important findings. And I could notice that standard methods of analysis, they have been employed, particularly the statistical methods they have been used to draw the inferences from this. And all the presentations, they're very clear, and everybody has a good understanding of the topic that they were dealing with. So carry home message seems that agro ecosystems, so they can play a very important role in biodiversity conservation, and they're certainly complementary to the protected areas. So it's a very, very important dimension. But when we are talking about agro ecosystems, so we have to keep in mind that climate change, so that is going to make a difference. And climate change, so very often, so when the climate change term is used, so it is believed that the temperature is rising because of CO2 levels going up, but it is not that simplistic. We have to appreciate and we have to understand that it is much more complex than having only CO2 or methane or these gases. There are an array of abiotic stresses. So drought, temperature, and all these abiotic stresses, they do not work in isolation. So they work in concert. So in a nutshell, so crops, they are going to experience so multiple stresses altogether. And when combined joint stresses, they work together, then their analysis becomes very, very difficult. The responses of the crops, that becomes very, very difficult. They become unpredictable because they can be antagonistic effects. They can be you see, additive effects, and they can be more than additive, synergistic effects. So it will be very, very difficult to understand this thing. And if agriculture faces all these abiotic stresses, so this will be reflected in the biodiversity composition also. Okay, so simple examples. So all aspects, they will be affected. So we need to understand this, and we need to try more agro ecosystems. So this can be a model, as Dr. Ghanshyam Sharma said, that this can be a model for other Himalayan regions, but we can learn from other aspects, other things also. For example, this agroforestry, so what should we try? So there is a need to analyze so different combinations. For example, I know from this Western Uttar Pradesh and Haryana and Punjab, so agroforestry when this was started, so eucalyptus was tried, but this turned out to be very disastrous for crops. So this has been stopped. Then poplar was also not. It also didn't work. So we have to perform more analysis to understand that what can support it better. But carry home message for today's presentation in this session is that agro ecosystems, they're very, very important habitats to support biodiversity. And I think the objective of the project that was taken up by ATREE and Sikkim University, that has been fulfilled by and large. So I congratulate all the stakeholders, all the participants in this project. So I thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to chair this session. In fact, this has been educative for me. I learned so many things. I'm trained in plant physiology, basically. So we worked on some medicinal plants, conservation issues through seed biology in Western Himalayas, so Kinnaur and Lahore. And so that is how we have some understanding about these systems. So I congratulate everybody, Dr. Khaling and Dr. Bhoj Acharya, and all the team members involved in this important work. So nothing better than publications can tell about the progress of the project. So 7 journal public. We know these days publishing is very, very difficult. And I was seeing that some papers are in very good journals. So thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Professor Sharma, for chairing this session and keeping us on time. Although we've exceeded a little bit today. And thank you very much to the participants. It's been a very, very long day. We started at almost 10:30, 10:45, and you all are still with us. It is 5:15 today, so it's been a marathon day. I would like to invite all of you to please participate tomorrow, because tomorrow we have very interesting sessions, nature-based solutions, role of biodiversity and ecosystem in the mountains. I think the concept of nature-based solutions is becoming more and more popular, and especially after COVID. I think all the big policies, global meetings, they're all talking about nature-based solutions. So tomorrow we'll get to hear a lot about this concept from people who are working on this. And in fact, there's someone there tomorrow, a very young scientist who's actually brought out a book, edited a book written by many, many people from all over the world. So I think it'll be very interesting for you all. It's not going to be hardcore ecological research, wildlife research, but I think it's important for young researchers to be able to see what use their research can be to the society. So I think it's important. The other important session for tomorrow is again policy implications. What sort of policy can we have in managing biodiversity and ecosystems in socio-ecological production landscapes? So I think we have an interesting lineup from Japan, from the UK, and from Delhi and Nepal. So it'll be very interesting. And then we'll have the concluding session. Apologies, today you all had to wait a long time in the waiting room, but tomorrow we will start at 10 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. And please do join us tomorrow.
Thank you and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much.